Hi guys, happy Tag Tuesday. I'm here with after a week off with a tag. Nobody tagged me in, but I wanted to do it. It's recent. It's called Books. It's called Seriously Well Read Tag. It was created by Randy the Literate Texan. I saw it on Books I'm Not Reading. The first question is, what's the book that made you take reading seriously? I remember. Being in maybe junior high or high school, early high school, going to our little library in our town, which is probably sadly slightly larger than the one in our school. So tiny libraries with very little, very few books. I mean, they had Pride and Prejudice and like Lord of the Rings. Of course, I read those and Agatha Christie and things of that ilk. But for some reason, they had Montaigne, and I had heard about him in my French class, and I wanted to read him. And he wrote these essays about every subject under the sun that are both super humane and erudite and thoughtful and funny. And it just showed me a whole way of thinking and writing about the world that really influenced how I read, write, think. So I think that's we could say Montaigne's essays definitely is one of the books that helped me make me take reading. I mean, I already took reading seriously from the minute I learned about it. That there was this magic that you could do, which was read, which was means you could tell stories, which is just amazing. So, I mean, I always since I can remember had that. But okay, the second one is something that you pretended to understand. Um, Well, pretty much any philosophy I've ever read, and about half the theology, including sometimes scripture as well. Um, I do remember I took a course in the Nouvelle Roman, new novel. Um, this was in grad school. I had already told them that I wanted to leave, and they had me do a sort of one-on-one reading course with because they wanted me to do new novel and I didn't want to do it, but they said I could do it with this one of the faculty there I really liked did the francophonie literature, so literature from places other than France. And I hadn't gotten to take a course with him, so I did the reading course with him. So it was a little more interesting than it would have been, but I really wasn't in love with it. And nonetheless, I read the books. It was almost like one a week, and I remember I had a particularly good discussion with him the week before on a book that I had gotten a lot out of. But for whatever reason, this week coming into the class, I hadn't read the book. I mean, I'd read the beginning, so I quickly read the ending and sort of skimmed the middle bit in time for our discussion, and didn't fess up. But we so obviously discussed it in sort of more general terms than I would have normally, right? And I remember him being like so amazed by our discussion that week, and he thought it was just so great. And he was saying, contrasting it to the week before when I had had so much to say because I had much more insight into the book, and I just really thought that this whole academic game was, just sort of not for me. What did I say to them? I said, Je suis venu prendre les lettres de l'humanité et non pas de l'alphabet. I said, I came to receive the letters, which means like that humanities of l'humanité, of humanity, not les lettres de l'alphabet, not the letters of the alphabet. This whole grades. Because then I also figured out that week that he was grading each of our discussions, and I thought, this is just insane. So I can't remember which of those authors it was that I hadn't really fully read that week. Was it Surratt? Duras would be the one you would probably most likely know. She wrote The Lover. They made a beautiful movie of it. Robbe-Gris is one of the founders. I think it might have been Tropisms, or was it Jalousie, which means um, blinds, Venetian blinds. Anyway, it was one of those works. But what I wanted to say is that I'm always pretending to understand everything, and especially I try to thought of something in particular would be Shakespeare because I don't reread a lot, as I mentioned before, but I do have occasion to re-encounter Shakespeare regularly, and I always get something more out of everything, no matter like even Hamlet or something I've read tons of times. You just every time you come back to Shakespeare, you get more out of it, and hopefully that's true of all your reading. So you're always sort of, let's say not pretending, let's say provisory. You're always making provisory readings of your works. Okay, so works that three. I'm allowed to pick three works that I would say are like core texts or fundamental texts that everyone should read. Well, I suppose you'd want to pick sort of Western culture, Eastern culture, Southern culture if I could, but I couldn't. I couldn't. I did my best. I came up off the top of my head with Ramayana. That's got to be there, number one. For the Western, I pick Ovid's Metamorphosis over, Iliad and everything. I think it gives you the most meat on the bone in terms of different myths and ideas of our Western background. And then I only had one left, so I would have loved to have picked like Sunjata, the Sun King, or um, gosh, I don't know, Popova or Dinebane or any of the Indian epics, what American Indian Amerindian epics. Anyway, I went with Journey to the West um, because I also couldn't leave Buddhism out because it didn't say if it was fiction or nonfiction. So I went with I would say epics are beyond fiction, nonfiction. They're sort of above that. Okay, so next question is something I've avoided reading. I would say Blood Meridian. So already Cormac McCarthy's what is it? That killer, he makes you flip a coin and he gets you with the air hose. Um, old No Killer for Old Men or whatever it's called. Anyway, that one that the Coen brothers did. That guy's already scary enough for me. I don't need any scarier. And I read The Road and thought it was terrible. I mean, just garbage. Um, and so that would be actually, to be honest with you, my hope is that I would start Blood Meridian and say, oh yeah, there's nothing to this. No, Emperor's got no pants. Um, but I'm afraid to find out it is like a classic, and then it's just this awful, grow lit, more misogynistic, violent, gore than we ever needed. So I know Bloom liked him, and I should read him. I generally trust Bloom's take on things, but yeah, I almost secretly hope that I do hate it, and maybe I'll just never read it and leave it at that. Okay, so more and more as I get older, I'm more inclined to take that course on certain things, books and other things. Six is a book that changed the way I read. I would say Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind by D.T. Suzuki. One of the things he talks about in this is the idea of non-dualistic thinking, that we're always going along all the time. He's like, I like this, I don't like that. Or yeah, as we read something, we're like, I agree with that, I don't agree with that, I agree with that, don't agree with that. Half a booktube is that, isn't it? And he said that that's a real trap that human beings fall into, and part of how we lapse into ignorance and fail to realize our our already imminent Buddhahood, and that part of what could help us remember our Buddhahood is non-dualistic thinking. So try to practice that sometimes in reading and in other ways. So seven is what is this question? 100 good. That doesn't make much sense, does it? I have to have a little pause here. I'll be right back.